Serious. Historians, marine biologists, biologists, and cryptozoologists have read it. As far as legends and history go, what legendary creature do you believe may have been real and probably existed in some way? Or what supposedly legendary person in history was more than likely real? It's Em here. Please enjoy some more serious stories. I'm gonna try and do less commentary today, like a video we did recently. Please do let me know if you guys like this or prefer the more frequent little clips I like to add in at the end to better talk with you guys. Thanks. Story 1. Alright, as a historian, giants. They exist in some form over many cultures in history. My favorite story is about a Native American tribe that told the story of the giants that killed them to near extinction, generations upon generations ago, and how they were a horrible beast and quite large. All the characteristics of giants. Truth be told, and this is probably true of most legends or accounts of giants, that it's just a height relative thing, a majority of the population was quite small back in the day. Besides being easier to hide and run, less body mass meant less food needed and more chances of survival. But I digress. People were quite small, like average 5-footers and less. Anyone who was taller was probably considered a giant, and all the whole tribe a giant people. 5'10" and above must have been especially terrifying when they were a warring tribe or just in conflict with you. So the generational story was just about a smaller height-wise tribe that encountered a taller height-wise tribe, and they fought. The story of the giants. The natives have a lot of stories of supernatural creatures that were just odd to them, humans. The pale-faced beasts were probably Vikings. Vikings caused a whole migration of a tribe as well. It's really interesting in my field of work to just put things in perspective. You gain so much. Edit some grammar. But a lot of you seem to lump the idea that all giants were baby elephant skulls. No, this story I reference actually had archaeological evidence that one tribe versus another in a small area existed, with an unproportionate height difference. I'm still looking for the story I'm referencing. Also, the Vikings were a different story. When the Vikings settled in Newfoundland for that short time span, they encountered hostile native tribes. Some diseases were spread, some fighting happened, the usual. And this native tribe warned their daughter tribe that the white pale beasts, not verbatim, were coming and they needed to leave the area. This begins the migration of the Anishinaabe, sorry if I said that wrong, guys, that traveled the Lawrence River to the Great Lakes and settled at the Ojibwe, the Potawatomi, and the Ottawa tribes. This is a condensed, bastardized version of the whole story. Please keep in mind, and the tribe names might be wrong. Story 2. Very simple mythological creatures like black dogs were probably exaggerated stories of encountering wild dogs in the dead of night. They're often described as having glowing eyes, which isn't an unusual effect when torchlight is reflected in dogs' or cats' eyes. The black dog spirits and myths of the British Isles were also likely the grim Professor Trelawney was talking about in The Prisoner of Azkaban. Somebody added, I live in Suffolk, England, where the most high-profile cases of the black dog, or black shuck, have happened. I was over at a friend's house who lived in a village over from me. Her dad took me home, and my friend came along for the ride. Partway home, middle of nowhere, late in the evening, her dad almost swerved to miss something. We carried on, but he was visibly shaken. My friend also reacted to seeing something, and they both described the exact same thing. A big, black, shaggy dog in the middle of the road, staring at them. It was the size of a large wolf, but looked skinnier, and its fur was far more coarse and matted. I was looking through the windscreen at the time as this all happened, and I saw nothing. The black dog is supposed to give a forewarning of death in the family. I can't remember if that happened, but I do recall my friend losing her grandmother and uncle at around the same time in our lives. I wish I could recall if it was after seeing the dog, but either way, it's a spooky tale. Story 3. The Maori people of New Zealand have long told stories of the pokai, a monstrous bird that was big enough to hunt and eat humans. Many believe that these stories are referring to the Haast eagle. It was the largest species of eagle ever to have lived on Earth, with weights of around 30 pounds and wingspans almost reaching 10 feet. It lived on New Zealand's South Island and primarily hunted the flightless moa bird, which weighed around 500 pounds. Given the large size of its main prey, it's likely that the eagle may have also targeted lone humans as well. Interestingly enough, the Haast eagle went extinct around the year 1400, not long after the Maori arrived in New Zealand. It's thought that its extinction can be attributed to habitat destruction, combined with the extinction of the moa due to hunting by the Maori. Someone commented, there's a child's skull in a museum somewhere with markings on the back and front near the eye sockets. Originally, archaeologists believed it to be linked to violence or sacrifice, until they discovered it matched the talons of the Haast eagle exactly, and that it had been discovered in a pile of bones similar to the piles left by modern birds of prey. Kid was about 6 and got a bird snagged. Story 4. I believe that Bigfoot probably does exist. or at least did until very recently. But I doubt that it was a unique species. My theory is that what people see as a mundane animal, probably a large brown bear, with serious genetic deformities, encountering a 7-foot bear with mange. Probably a deformed cranium, possible scars from fights with other bears, and other such traits would certainly trigger a fight or flight response. You see something like that, you haul butt in the other direction. When you stop, you're not 100% certain of what you saw, so your brain fills in the details. So, you take a deformed animal and mix it with an imaginative mind that knows what the popular version of Bigfoot looks like, and you get a bona fide Bigfoot sighting. Somebody commented, when a bear has been shot and skinned, it looks disturbingly humanoid. I won't say that you just debunked Bigfoot, but I sure would bet that someone somewhere has seen a particularly pitiful bear and thought that it was an ape sort of thing. After all, an animal with no hair looks a lot like an animal with no skin. Somebody then said, I've said this for years, that bears just look like people in bear costumes. Somebody responded to them saying, that's a very unnerving thing to read late at night. Story 5. There's a small population of albino deer in my area, and they are beautiful. Definitely ethereal looking and totally match the European description of a unicorn. Somebody commented, the mythical unicorn likely derives from travelers from Africa or Asia to Europe, trying to describe a rhinoceros. There are Asian rhinos in India, Nepal, and Indonesia. When you consider that ancient Greek depictions of lions sometimes look more like dogs, and that the word hippopotamus comes from Greek, words meaning river horse, it's easy to see how a Greek traveler would describe a rhino as a one-horned horse. There's linguistic evidence for this idea. 400 years ago, it was believed that there were 2 types of rhinos. One with 2 horns, who were called rhinoceros, and one with a single horn, who were called a unicorn. So the word unicorn was used to describe both real rhinos and the mythical one-horned horse. It wasn't until zoology advanced as a science that unicorn came to refer purely to the mythical creature. There are still remnants of the original usage though. The genus of the scientific names for Asian rhinos, which have 1 horn, is Unicornissus. Story 6. Well, I suppose existed is being stretched here, but many people until fairly recently were adamant that Cyclops exist or existed. The evidence they used turned out to be the skulls and bones of dinosaurs or elephants. There's also evidence for King Arthur existing, but similarly to Moses, it seems to have been a dude that did some stuff. But later, other big fish stories got attributed to him, and it just grew over time. Back then, it was common to change the names of the folk heroes so that the story itself would be remembered. Also, dragons. Nearly every culture has a mythological giant lizard. In a way, they're correct. Almost all the evidence they gave turned out to be dinosaur bones or fossils. Edit, thank you for the silver, kind Redditor. Somebody said, fun fact, Trisomy 13 can cause babies to look like Cyclops. Trisomy 13 rarely ever makes it to birth, but I could see how people believed in Cyclops. Somebody else then said, fun fact, don't search birth-related defects or genetic illnesses on Google Images. You'll thank me later. Story 7. The wendigo probably existed, just not as a creature. People in the far north who survived a brutal winter by eating a family member had a psychological escape hatch for the guilt and horror by convincing themselves they were transforming into a ravenous, murderous beast. They'd continue killing and eating in a hysteric delusion that they had no control over it. Wendigo hunters would then have to come and kill them and perform a shamanic ritual to assure that the rest of the tribe that the taint wouldn't spread. It's actually an incredible, fascinating study into culturally specific mental illnesses. The lengths the mind will go in order to avoid dealing with a traumatic event are so extraordinary that in the culture they would actually continue to murder and cannibalize fellow tribe members under the delusion that they had transformed into a monster. Story 8. Oh man, you want the real gold standard crap on this? You want Aboriginal tales from Dreamtime, which in many cases have been proven to be validated records predating the end of the last ice age. They coexisted with megafauna in Australia, and their crypto creatures have literally been linked to now existent fauna. Somebody said, the oral tradition of Australia is so incredible to me. Just the idea that history could be passed down so accurately for so long is just freaking amazing. Somebody responded to them saying, it really is. I mean, you think about the Rosetta Stone and how that was a holy crap moment, because it unlocked the Egyptian language and pushed back our knowledge about 5,000 years. Aboriginal myths and legends go back 20,000 years. Story 9. Archaeologists here. There's a really interesting ancient Egyptian story called the Shipwrecked Sailor, in which a man is washed ashore on a beautiful island and is apprehended briefly by an enormous serpent. In the story, the serpent tells him that there used to be hundreds of others like him, but a falling star wiped them all out. I think it's unlikely that the Egyptians had knowledge of dinosaurs, but there's a site called Wadi Hatan that has thousands of ancient whale skeletons from the Eocene. I think it's possible that they could have seen these skeletons and mistaken them for giant snakes. Herodotus actually tells similar tales of giant flying snakes in Egypt, and I suppose if you saw these skeletons but no trails, you might think that they were capable of flight. Story 10. There are many diseases that the origin of the vampire and vampire myth can be traced back to. However, I think rabies fits the most. In the olden days, people would tie those suspected of it to trees. In about 3 days' time, the disease would drastically change them. Extreme light sensitivity, paleness, aggression, excessive drooling. They would try to attack you and have bouts of either extreme slow fatigue or even adrenaline. Also, rabies can be passed from person to person through a bite, not just an infected animal. Somebody commented, rabies honestly sounds like how a modern zombie virus would work, but unlike science fiction, rabies is real and terrifying. Story 11. I regularly get to see pods of humpback whales at the beach where I surf. Most of the time, all you see is their backs as they partially surface from the water. Occasionally, one of them breaches mouth first, so you see a giant mouth emerge from the water. Other times, you see a giant tail emerge. If you were watching them and had no idea what a whale was, or that you were looking at multiple of them, I could easily imagine mistaking multiple whalebacks as the coils of a colossal snake. I strongly suspect that this is the origin of the legends of sea serpents. Story 12. The Kraken probably existed. It could just be a colossal squid, but those sailors had to have seen something. Somebody commented, with colossal squids existing today and the fact that animals were larger a long time ago, things like a megalodon, a Kraken-sized squid is certainly possible. Somebody added to that, yeah, given the existence of colossal squids, the Kraken is the most believable myth to me. Early sailors thought manatees were fish girls. They probably saw some kind of colossal squid and the legend was born. Story 13. The Cyclops of Greek mythology. Go Google up an elephant skull. There's this huge hole right in the middle of it looking to all the world like a single eye. Now add this to the knowledge that the Cretan dwarf mammoth left subfossil bones on Crete easily discoverable, was 1 meter at the shoulder, and could be more or less assembled into a giant humanoid. Somebody commented, you don't even need to arrange the bones. Just make the skeleton stand on its hind legs, remove the tusks, and boom, a Cyclops skeleton. Story 14. The Banshee was never real. But lots of Irish parents came up with a story about a screaming woman that kept their kids terrified and in their beds. The Banshee's woeful wail meant kids had to stay in bed or get stolen away. This story was told so that the parents in question could have adult time, loud adult time, because the kids would have heard their mom's noises and interpreted them as a ghostly call from beyond the grave. Story 15. I think unfortunate people in the past with hair disorders where hair covers their body are the root cause of people thinking of the idea of werewolves. This, mixed with the likely solitary lifestyle that they had passed because people found them scary, led to people thinking that they were less than human, and it wasn't long before someone said they were an animal, or at least half animal. Somebody commented, TBH, having seen my Italian grandfather shirtless, I understand where they're coming from. Story 16. Changelings. Babies switched out by fairies were probably an early explanation for birth defects. Somebody commented, more likely, autism. Children with autism seem to develop normally for 12 to 18 months, then suddenly change and become much more withdrawn and uncommunicative. You could easily believe that your kid had been stolen by the fairies and an imposter left in their place. Note that 12 to 18 months is also when kids get their immunizations, hence the vaccines made my kid autistic BS. Story 17. The Norwegians invented high-carbon steel when they were making swords that would out the bones of predators into the molten metal, which added carbon. The fact that they didn't grasp the scientific concept made it even more metal. Somebody said, the interesting part is that they believed that adding the bones to their weapons would imbue them with a kind of magic power, making the weapon stronger. Story 18. Alligators. Alligators are freaking huge. Now that we protect them, we're starting to get huge freaking alligators again. It's amazing some of the viral photos and videos are real, and that those freakers, God willing, will only get more huge as we need to understand prehistoric animals. This crap will become real again. Story 19. Chupacabra. It has to be some poor sick animal with mange. Mange is highly contagious, so if a pack of coyotes or wild dogs got it, they would all have a weird appearance and attack other animals out of hunger. Somebody said, it's similar with jackalopes and whooptlingers. There's actually a cancer that causes rabbits to have large horn-like protrusions from its heads. Story 20. The mythical kingdom of Prester John probably did exist. It's likely Ethiopia, but since information was passed slowly and through hundreds of retellings back in the 14th to 17th centuries, it's likely the story of Ethiopia was mistold after some period of time and respun into the story of the kingdom of Prester John. Story 21. The Yeti. Recently, they sequenced some DNA from some so-called Yeti evidence that pretty much all turned out to be bears. Some extinct, some still around. To me, the most interesting one was the crossbreed of the black bear and the polar bear. Story 22. I've heard of a hypothesis that states the Ragnarok myth actually describes an impact event. The Midgard snake could be an object entering the atmosphere. Somebody commented, there was a Bronze Age meteorite impact in Estonia that became a key element of Finnish mythology. Perhaps the myth percolated over to the Nordics. Story 23. The pea is a bird and the river panther. Sorry if I pronounced this wrong. The Mishi Bijwi. There are probably some large eel-like species that existed in the Mississippi River that have long gone extinct. There are too many concurrent myths describing similar-ish creatures from different places and cultures along the rivers in North America. Story 24. Western concepts of sea monsters highly resemble Plosaurus and similar extinct animals. Myths would have been created after those fossils were discovered. Or, hear me out, the crap's descendants are still swimming around. Edit, descendants, not ancestors. Story 25. 1. Based on multiple descriptions of the Australian cryptid, the bunyip, I firmly believe them to be seals who swim inland. 2. The kraken were likely colossal squid which swam up to the surface. 3. The black demon shark of Mexico is just a large great white shark with pigment issues. Story 26. 1. I believe that stories of wild men, giants, hairy bipeds, and more are rooted in hunter-gatherer cultures which existed on the periphery of civilization, as defined by early subsistence farmers. 2. King Arthur existed as at least one post-Roman warlord. Story 27. The Lusca, a giant octopus. It supposedly lives in the blue holes of the coast of Florida, and the amount of food and temperature of water both support the theory of an octopus living long enough to grow way larger than we expect based on our current records. Story 28. A rock could have been real. It was most likely inspired by the elephant bird of Madagascar. An elephant bird was likely a big old ostrich about 9 feet high. They didn't coexist until the 16th or 17th century. Story 29. The giant sea serpent. Pirates and sailors had drawn stories about a giant snake that would stick its head up above water, but it turns out that it was just a whale flinging its pee-pee above water. There's a good chance something like the Loch Ness Monster existed at some point in time.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.